Yes, good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. What are we on the 14th? A lot of us wrapping. If you're in education, you're wrapping up maybe for the holidays here pretty soon. So nice to have you here for the California Placement Association's monthly webinar. My name is Greg Friedman. I am the Vice President of the California Northern Region. On our board, I'm going to look and have other board members quickly introduce themselves. Rosalinda, I see you, so I will let you start off.
Well, thank you, Greg.
Yourself?
I appreciate that, Greg. Hi, everybody throughout the state of California. I want to welcome you also on behalf of California Placement Association. I'm Rosalinda Rivas. I am a board member, volunteer board member here, and also the past president. Happy to be part of today's event. I want to thank you all for being here. And I just want to do a quick plug in. Nikki Cook used to be on the board here. So hi, Nikki from Southern California out at Moreno Valley College as well. And I am the apprenticeship director at Moreno Valley College. Welcome. Go ahead, Greg.
Awesome. No, So we're going to get started. I know there's people still coming in. It's my pleasure today to introduce Erick Serrato. He's Executive Director of our own Merced County Department of Workforce and Investment. Before he came to us, 2 years ago, Erick?
That's right.
Around there? Yeah. Came from Long Beach. So he's the Assistant Executive Director down there for the City of Long Beach Workforce Bureau. Super excited. I love listening to you and your insights on where we're going, which is why I asked you to wrap up our calendar year here with where's California been? California Placement Association is all about workforce, helping people get employed, externships, human resource people, employers. So I'm really excited to have you here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Greg, for inviting me. So happy to see so many people kind of join in and nerd out on workforce stuff. Want to thank Rosalinda as well. She presented last month and thoroughly freaked me out with how well her presentation was. So I ran to my desk to try to make some PowerPoint slides. So I will try to do you proud, Rosalinda. I also want to thank my team. I think there's some, I see some local names from Merced County in the Central Valley, and want to thank the people in Merced's very own WorkNet. I get to work with an amazing group of people, and I think a few of them have just done me the favor of showing up today, maybe because they were worried that no one else would. So I just want to thank you for having my back. And I will jump into a PowerPoint. That sounds good. Okay. All right. So I will kind of jump right in, but I'm going to first start on some terms. So there's a lot of talk that we do around workforce development, and I was years into my job before anyone even really explained this stuff to me. So I thought we'd start very basic and go into some discussion about these terms, because they really do inform our understanding of the labor market. And as we go through these, I would love for people to sort of ask questions on the fly. I've got 5 trends that we'll talk about that I think are going to inform 2023. And I'm going to pause at every trend to have hopefully a little bit of discussion. I think, Greg, if you could help me out with the chat, let me know if people are sort of tossing things into the chat. But I would encourage us all to just kind of ask questions as they go. So unemployment rate, labor participation rate, turnover rate, and the JOLTS rate. We'll start with unemployment rate, which I know most of you understand, but just kind of bear with me here. So the unemployment rate for any particular area is the number of residents without a job that are looking for work divided by the total number of area residents and the labor force, right? So with all of these statistics, it's very easy to get caught up in an actual number. And what we need to understand about unemployment rate and all these different kind of indicators is that they're all very flawed, okay? They are estimates, points in time that are informed by a bunch of different historical data that often changes before the rates and the percentages that we're giving have time to catch up. But just as a basic, the unemployment rate is basically taking the number of people in the civilian workforce and you divide it by the number of people that are actually unemployed. So what I've got down here is Merced County's actual data for October. and you see that there were 117,700 people in the civilian labor force, which is also an estimate. That's not like a real number. That's an estimate that people have derived based on historical data. And then you've got the number of people that are unemployed. Now, there's a lot of different things that go into calculating this, but essentially they take the labor force, which we'll talk about in a second, and the labor force participation rate, and then they call around. Nationally, the Bureau of Labor Statistics calls thousands of people across the country, and it asks them if they're working. And it also calls businesses to find out whether or not they've laid people off or if they've hired new people. So my trivia question for folks is, how many households do you think are surveyed each month across the nation? Anybody shout it out. Give me a number.
10,000.
10,000. Anybody else? I see Mary on there. Rosalinda, what's a number?
Go with 19,555.
Okay. All right. We're doing a Price is Right here. Can I get a third?
1 million.
Ooh.
1 million. Yeah. It should be 1 million. It's only 60,000. Okay.
Oh.
So 60,000 people across, a country of 300 million is a very, 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 very thin slice, right? And so it's very difficult to have tons of faith in the unemployment rate, because they're only randomly selecting 60,000 households to get information on as to whether or not they're working. So it really relies on the calculation of what we consider the labor force, what I'll get into next. But any questions on the unemployment rate? Any confusion anyone's ever had on that? No, I find this stuff fascinating. Okay, labor participation rate. It's the participation rate that represents like all of the people as a percentage of like the civilian population. So it's the percentage of people that are actually looking for work or actually working. This is also impossible to know. It's really difficult to understand like whether a population is actively looking for work or not. But they come up with a formula of different figures to take a best guess at what it is. What other kinds of data, as my trivia point, do you think we use to calculate the labor force estimate? What other kinds of information, since it's a guess? What's another piece of info they might use?
Age, right? I mean, you have to have workforce age.
Yeah, it's great. So they take people that are working age, which is typically like 16 to I think 65 is the age range. So they look at the number of people that are within a statistical age range. They also try to calculate able-bodied, able to fully contribute into the workforce. They take unemployment rate or unemployment claims into account to develop this estimate. So the reason why labor participation rate is so important in our conversation is because there's been a downward shift in the labor participation rate for a lot of years. And there's a lot of ways to think about that. You can get really depressed about it and say that people are just like dropping out of the labor force because they aren't able to find jobs. But another indicator or another way to understand it is that people are moving into self-employment. So this labor rate does not capture folks that are driving for Uber or doing other kinds of gig work. It doesn't capture people that are, leaving the job market to start their own business. It's just people that are actively looking for work. So we hear a lot of like doomsday scenarios about labor participation rate over the last few years. It's not all bad news. It means that people are actively moving into other ways of making income. One of the bright spots of the pandemic was that, by leaps and bounds, the number of people that started their own business like tripled over the course of those 2 years. which is really exciting because we know that that leads to further job growth. Okay, turnover rate is a different indicator that we don't talk enough about a lot. It is, it's the sleeper of our unemployment data. And it's basically a calculation that takes into account all of the people that are hired minus all of the people that are laid off or fired. And it's captured in something called the JOLTS report that takes an accounting of the pluses and the minuses. So it's taken one day every year. Any guess on the date of the month that the JOLTS report is taken, from 1 to 31? What date do you think it's taken?
On the 1st?
On the 1st. Good guess. It's actually the 12th. So it's right there in the middle.
It had a 1. It had a 1 in it.
It had a 1. It had a 1.
That's the one.
Yeah, and it's taken as a way to really calculate like the churn. We use that word in labor market information, the churn, the number of people that are going in and out of jobs. And the good thing is that the churn or the labor turnover is reducing, right? So we saw a lot of dislocation during the pandemic, but as you can see sort of in these graphs, but it's really kind of chilled out, which is just an indicator of more stability in our workforce environment. Any question about JOLTS or labor force or employment rate? I know it's riveting. Okay, so let's get to our 5 trends. A disclaimer. So I am not a labor economist. Any of you that are going to take notes down and let me know that I'm totally wrong, I'll just let you know you win. You're right. We don't need to argue about it. But I am someone who watches the labor market really closely and someone who has a real passion for this kind of work. And so what I've done is I've thought about 5 things that are happening nationally, also in California, and have direct impact in our work as placement and workforce professionals that I thought you might be interested to hear about. And I'd love to go through each of the 5 and have a little bit of conversation about them. So I will go one by one. I'll give you some stats, give you some information, and then kind of ask you whether or not you're seeing this happening in your particular area. And I would love to know what's happening, not just because it makes our time together more interesting, but also because I'm learning from you. I would love to know if you see this or if you've heard this from your employers. Okay, ready to go? All right.
We're ready.
All right, we're ready. Trend number 1 is pay transparency. Okay, so this is something that's been evolving over the last 4 or 5 years. California was one of the first. It has a statewide law that says employers cannot request salary history and they have to disclose salary ranges. So we've been in this space much earlier than the rest of the country. San Francisco actually has even a more stringent policy around the kinds of information that an employer must disclose. But a big thing happened in New York City. It passed actually this time last year, but took effect just in November. And it says that that employers have to tell you up front and in their job advertisements how much any job is going to pay, right? So that is even like a step further. The California law kind of said you have to disclose it. The New York law, the New York City law says that on every job, on every Indeed posting, on everything that happens in the city, you've got to list those pay ranges. This is a very big deal in terms of the way that employers have been able to kind of share information. There's a lot of reasons as an employer, as a supervisor, as a hiring manager, I can tell you there's a lot of reasons why businesses like to keep that close to the chest because they're not sure what they're able to pay, and it creates maybe some confusion in the actual job. But it's a big leap forward for workers. there's a new law that was passed but won't take effect until January of 2023. And that's that employers with 15 or more employers, they have to include a position salary or hourly range in any internal and external job posting. So this matches what's happening in New York City, but also says that it has to be shared internally. So there's been a lot of confusion about whether or not as employees you can talk about how much money you're making or compare yourself to other people. Those of us that work in the public sector have enjoyed this kind of transparency, but it is totally new for the private sector, and is probably going to inform a lot of work. So there's a couple ways that I think that this is going to inform kind of the work that we do with our clients. One is this law encourages job seekers to ask explicitly for this information. Employers should know that they have to give it. So we should be empowering our clients to ask, like, what is the range and what makes the difference between, you know, the $23 start to the $27 cap. We're allowed to ask, like, you know, what kinds of qualifications would put me at the beginning or at the end of that pay scale, and how do you make that decision? You know, that's a really good follow-up question for someone in an interview to ask, and totally okay. It also changes the way that we'll be able to sort through job postings. One of the things that's really difficult is to understand, like, well, is this job better than the other? So I think what you'll see is more employers kind of taking advantage of the opportunity to say, this is what your pay is, but this is also what the benefit structure is. It should create more competition in the system around job quality and pay. So you might see employers like doing different kinds of advertisements in the way that they kind of describe and post their jobs. And because we're now like in the 5th year of an employer not, you know, being able to ask you how much you made at your last job, or not allowed to like list it on an application, we should be encouraging our clients to jump farther up the ladder than they normally would have, right? So I'm a sort of a mid-range employee and I've been making $26 an hour. Back when they could ask me, well, what are you making now? I would have been much more nervous to leap for something $10 or $12 more, because an employer would have been looked at that and said, well, your value is really at a $26. I might give you a bump, but why would I pay you so much more? Without that in place, we should be encouraging our clients to leapfrog into the highest category they possibly could, and preparing them for questions around that pay scale and how they see themselves, you know, either in the beginning or the middle or the end of that pay scale, and really kind of manage that interview from that perspective. So I will take a pause for any questions or thoughts you guys have on pay transparency, or if you're talking to your clients about it, or maybe you've already seen it happen with businesses in your area.
Don't be shy, people.
I know, because I will call on you. Mario, I'm going to pick on my own. What are you seeing in terms of the way people are posting jobs right now?
Yeah, great question there, Eric. So from our side, from what we are seeing, you know, we do have a variety of different businesses that request assistance on posting vacancies in the area. Some of the employers that we receive from our end are transparent when it comes to wages based on the specific requirements. Some of them feel that it's not an appropriate approach to display the wages, and most of the times we tend to get that information from their end to see if that could help elevate, to encourage additional applicants to apply for certain jobs if wages are not displayed. Some may oppose and say, hey, I want to be able to discuss it when I am able to meet with this individual in person, so that way it leaves us with room for flexibility if there's some negotiation. Some of them feel that if I post the vacancy amount in terms of wages, maybe perhaps it's going to perhaps scare off or not encourage any of those applicants to apply, because maybe they have like a certain amount that they're expecting, but obviously based on the posting, it's not to encourage. And so that's some of the information that we have received from our area. But for the most part, we try to encourage those to try to be as transparent as much as possible, so that way it could attract as much as applicants to assist their labor force needs.
Yeah, thanks. Rosalinda.
Yeah, and I want to make a notation from the other side of the spectrum with the job speakers. I think when working with clients, a lot of what we've been hearing is it's great that they're posting the job amounts, because now they can select on where they want to invest the time to actually apply. And I think that's also helping out with the ghosting that goes on. A lot of times before, when the positions were not posting the salaries, people would apply and they would find out, they're like, oh, forget it. And so sometimes even job seekers wouldn't apply for positions and lose out on opportunities because they didn't know what it paid. And so they were going or applying for positions with other companies that were posting. So this helps with the equity and accessibility. So I think it's a great law that helps everybody be transparent. Also for, I want to say, equal pay, equal work, you know, all of that. So I think it's a win-win, and it helps all of us that are here. Luis is putting something in the chat box that says it could be a red flag if employers do not post their wages from an applicant's perspective. Yeah, thank you, Luis.
It's a good point. Yeah.
And a quick shout out to Luis, who's a former amazing board member at CPA. Okay, that's it.
That's good.
Take it, Eric.
No, those are great points. I love the point on parity and pay, sort of an equity lens to that work. I think it's great. I think it's really good. And it may be an opportunity for those of us that are in business engagement. Either put it in your newsletter or an email out to folks, just as a reminder, like, hey, we often hound you for, the pay information on that job you want us to do. Well, there's this new law, you kind of have to do it anyway, So it allows us to kind of, educate them a little bit on something and bring them online. Okay. Trend number 2, here we go. I don't know why I froze here. Give me a second. Okay. All right. Trend number 2, young workers are putting their dream on hold. All right. So there's been some really interesting data over the last 6 or 7 months about young workers and their response to the pandemic and then the post-pandemic. And so what we've been told is that young workers are just like tough to deal with, they're like, have all these demands. They're using words like equity, which is really scary. All of these things, right? That just make them not the kind of workers that you want to kind of like tap into. But a lot of that is myth, right? And so what we're seeing in the data is that job seekers that are younger in age are now trending towards stability. What we had heard from them and from other and from employers and educators overall was that young people were really focused on their dream job, that they wanted something that was like connected to their mission and purpose in life, and they were willing to forego other things for something that they just were really, really excited about. And while that is true and that is good, we're seeing a couple indicators that are telling us something different. So one of the things you'll see here at the bottom is from Handshake. Those of you that are in the education world know all about Handshake. So of the 1,400 recent college graduates and current seniors to ask about their top job priority, 73% said stability. Fewer than half by comparison said a priority was to work for a known brand. That is a pretty significant shift in the way that people are making some decisions. Then you've got another quote up here from a different article. The share of job seekers of all ages who said security was one of their top priorities rose to 37% from 31% in January. That's also a really interesting indicator from ZipRecruiter. And there are lots of reasons why this is happening. A shift away from things like location or brand or flexibility or purpose or mission into stability are really telling us that young workers are waking up to the reality of the financial situation. they are much more prone to be informed by news items that have to deal with the tech sector than other areas of the job market. And so if you've been listening to the tech sector, you know, your newsfeed is filled with like Elon Musk at Twitter and Meta and all of this downsizing that's happening in that field. And young people are much more susceptible to be informed by that kind of news than maybe like a report on job growth in the manufacturing sector, right? So that is kind of changing their perception of what the economy is doing. There's other things that are concentrated in this sector of the labor force, including like mental distress, an overall feeling of uncertainty in the world with, you know, global news events like Ukraine, global inflation, other economic stressors that they're really thinking about, which is making them think about financial security. And so it's a really interesting shift that we're seeing in this demographic. And those of you that are at the college level that are really kind of preparing people out of your career centers, you might see this as well. And you might, you know, shift a little bit in some of the different job opportunities that you're offering folks. There's also a reason to think the fact that workers are kind of changing their behavior around the job search is a bad thing. You know, we typically think that millennials or Gen Zs hop around different jobs at any kind of whim. You know, there's a lot of myths out there that they're like, oh, I just don't want to work today. And so they like disappear and fly off into the horizon and you never see them again. That's what employers will tell you. But we actually want young people to job hop in this beginning part of their career, because that's how they figure out what job works best. And it's actually where they have the greatest accelerant in their wage growth. When they are in their 20s and early 30s is when they're going to skip from job to job. Not great maybe for the employer, but it is great. It is better for the economy and for the worker for them to have this kind of mobility. So the fact that they're being informed by, you know, all the scary news and the financial stress and, you know, seeing inflation change the price of a lot of things that they'd like to be able to purchase is not a really good indicator on our labor market. And those of us that really pay attention to the labor force, you know, appreciate the fact that they're like choosing stability, which is really great for employers, but not so excited about the fact that they aren't seeking opportunities that could probably get them further along in the long term. I'll take a pause there. Lots of you work with young people. What are you seeing in your job seekers, what they're asking for, the kinds of jobs that they're trying to be placed in?
I find this really interesting, Eric, because I know when we teach, we're always talking about purpose of work and where you want to live and a company that fits your values and size. And then you throw in stability. And then my daughter's about to graduate from college and I've talked with other UC students and it's like, we're never gonna be able to afford a home. And I really think like what they're looking for is money. And we're saying they're looking for stability, but then we're telling them at the same time, job hop now, because that's the quick way to move up the ladder as far as pay. All these different contrasting ideas going at the same time. Hard to wrap my head around.
Yeah, it's super tricky. Yeah, Rosalinda.
Yes, I just wanted to share, Lindsay indicated in the chat box. She says she agrees we're seeing the stability, that there's stability. Well, can't even read right. Hold on just a moment. My text is flying up and down as people are texting in there. Hold on, I lost it. We are seeing that stability is a major priority of young workers and that a meaningful job is very important. I feel that our youth are feeling discouraged and that even good jobs in our rural community still doesn't pay the bills. Great point. Thank you for sharing that.
Someone said participants want to feel a sense of purpose, of value in employment. People are agreeing. I'm seeing stability, but also that life and work balance. It's always a lot of one. They're asking a lot of students now remote jobs and flexible work schedules. I know my daughter's like, I know like 90%, my career will be remote. And I'm like, well, then why do you want to live in these certain areas? They're expecting this remote. They have the tools now to know what salary should be for when they come out of school. And they know, yeah, I'm gonna have a remote job and I'm gonna ask for this much money and not take anything less. I'm like, all right, you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, then you have Corey that mentioned that she's seeing this much with the college students. And Nikki Cook mentioned that lots of students but she put a lot of students that I work with ask for remote jobs. Oh, so you already read that one. So yeah, and you know
Yeah.
what's interesting too, and I think this is going to open up some of the laws and some of the guidelines within California as these trends become more popular. There are a lot of regulations with many companies where they can only hire within California because of their payroll, HR regulations, or unions. The way it's developed, or I'm going to say their regulations. I think with more remote work, they're going to allow opportunities, and we see it already, for people outsourced throughout different states and are working here in California. The big question is going to be, how do you tax, right? When their home state is outside and California is trying to cut into that piece of the pie, and that'll be interesting to see how that discussion continues on. So just wanted to share that as well.
Yes. And I see someone pinged about childcare. So remote work is really interesting. A lot of what we've experienced in the last 5 years, if you think about it, is a discussion about people who had remote work maybe for the first time, or were working in environments that didn't allow it and now allow it. So it's hard for us older folks to imagine a world in which the reality is quite the opposite. Like those of us who have been working sort of in traditional formats, we approach remote work differently from someone whose their first job is remote, right? So imagine that your like first 6 or 7 years of your entire career is remote, and then you have a job where you like go into a physical place. It's very interesting what will change in the next 4 or 5 years about organizational culture and workplace culture, because you're going to have a lot of people who to go into a place at all is like super foreign, and a lot of the conversation we've had about is people who were in traditional formats going into workplace, into virtual. So yeah, you're going to see a lot of shifts. I think you're absolutely right, Rosalinda. There's going to be a lot of policy discussion because this is very hard to keep up with in the way that it's doing. To be honest, I have friends that have like relocated to Mexico and continue to work on their jobs in the US. And so you could see even further sort of flight, right, or location changes, even internationally to do that.
Hey,
Okay.
Eric, real quick, Eric. Someone asked in regards to trend number 1, where could they reference the new law when they want to share this info with our employers?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you can, if you put your name in the chat, we'll make sure to send that to you. The California Employees Association, CEA, is a really great organization that like posts information on different law changes. You could also Google it around. The state has all of its labor laws updated, so you could go to the state labor agency. They have a good source of that. But if you leave your name in the chat, I'll make sure that I send you that information.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric.
Okay. All right. I think someone already brought this up. But trend number 3 on the Serrato list is interview ghosting. And I think you've all experienced this, right? Frustrating employers. We've experienced it in our own agency of people that sign up for interviews and then just like don't care to follow up at all. And you wonder what happened to that person. A lot of people will look at this, particularly from the job seeker side, is, that it's just karma. That employers have been doing a really bad job on their end of this in terms of the information that they give job seekers, the way that they kind of steward their job seekers through that process is really confusing and cold. And they're saying, hey, this is just like workers finally getting the upper hand on this whole arrangement. And so employers are kind of scrambling to figure out what to do. It's gonna be a continued trend, probably for the next few years, until employers really figure out how to deal with it. So there are a couple kind of like tips that you can give employers, that we can give employers. And it really is around relationship management in all of your recruitment. Typically, I'll tell you, we're guilty of the same thing. You think of that interaction or that relationship as they apply, you see them on paper, and then you set up an interview, and that's the first kind of interaction you have with them. But the main suggestion for employers is to think of that journey map of that experience starting much earlier. So that if there is a candidate that you're interested in and your interview is 3 weeks from now or 2 weeks from now, that you find out ways to have like more constant communication during that interim so that they don't just slip off. And a way to do that might be to email them sort of a testimonial from a current employee about what it's like to work there. You might send them more information about the benefits package or the healthcare package that they would get if they got this job. You might send them more information about your company so that they are better prepped for that interview. And you might do things like just like send a tickler, you know, to say like, hey, just wanted to make sure that you were, you know, ready for our interview. If you had any questions about the Zoom or whatever it might be, or, you know, getting to our location. It's really all about continuing to have close relationship through that whole process. One thing that a lot of employers are beginning to do is ask for feedback from no-shows and incentivize it. If it's worth a $5 Starbucks gift card to have them reply to an email, then you should send that out and say like, hey, you missed our interview. Is there a reason why you chose not to move forward? It could be really helpful for us, even if it's just like a survey monkey. And we're also asking employers to not just write someone off because they didn't show up. Not to take it so personally. I know we take it very personally, and our automatic assumption is like, this is not someone I want to work in my organization. It's really hard to get over that. But what we're encouraging employers to do is maybe send an email that says like, hey, you missed our interview, wondering if that was an accident or if you've already found something. We've had, you know, a situation where someone has said that they missed the first interview, or, you know, they got confused about the time, or they were considering another opportunity, but now they're thinking back to this original opportunity. It just might be worth it for employers to not get so offended by it and create a feedback loop that gets them more information. I just saw that Cindy Bader entered the chat, and Cindy's one of my favorite people on the planet. So just a shout out to Cindy. Thanks for joining from Southern California. Rosalinda.
Oh, I lost my thought.
Ghosting.
I got a squirrel moment. Oh yeah. I was gonna say another thing too that some HR managers are doing is they're sending out a survey, you know, haven't heard from you, hope everything's okay. And then they're asking, is there anything we can do to improve the onboarding process? Right? Because a lot of times the onboarding process could take a little too long and somebody else offers them a job and they accept it, and then this other job offers them, and so the job seeker ghosts the company. So HR managers are kind of doing like an auto survey thing just to kind of gather data to see what they can do internally to improve their onboarding or recruitment process, from recruitment to onboarding portion of it. So I just wanted to share that as well.
Yeah, very good.
And then Lisa had a comment. He's wondering if the trends of Indeed applying online easily makes it easier to apply for many jobs. Okay, as to apply to many jobs, create a disconnect from applicants to employers. That's a great point, right? Using job search engines and versus directly with the company. So you can share a little bit to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Luis is totally right. So what a lot of employers that are using Indeed or some of these online platforms is they are seeing a surge in applications, but that quality, you know, is going down. Right, it's people that are less focused on that particular thing. So that's another opportunity to use some of these tips for an employer. If they're flooded with them, you know, they can do a little bit of filtering to see who like replies back, or, you know, if that interaction like moves them closer to the interview. You might, you know, I've heard of employers before doing an interview just saying like, hey, do you have any quick questions? You know, you might make a staffer available to just answer quick questions about the job, and that interaction, helps move people more through that conversion funnel. But Luis is right that it does sort of incentivize more kind of rapid, broad, shotgun style application.
Eric, do you know, is there a trend on the reverse side of that, better communication from the employers during the whole interview process? When you turn in an application, you don't, luckily I've not had to apply for a job in a couple of years, like, hey, we got your application, you'll hear from us shortly. Or I think Luis is telling me a story, one of his clients or students was applied for a job and maybe got it and got basically an email from some weird email, we need your social. It started the onboard process, but there wasn't a lot of communication, I believe, with it.
Yeah.
And
I'll admit to this, even as a system as formal as working for the county, do we always remember to like send a declination letter to those folks that did interview? No, like they're interviewing and I'm like, oh man, like that was on my list to do. Or I've been in situations working for government where exactly that, like we didn't even send them an offer letter. We're just like, the HR person, we told the HR person, we want to hire Eric. The HR person asks for more information. When I even had a chance to like, confirm and negotiate salary or anything like that. Another way to maybe do it too is to send them a little bit of a journey map, which says like, these are the phases of what you're going to go through. Like we're going to interview, there's a second interview. At that time, you'll be able to, negotiate salary or, but giving them more hindsight, and it's a great way to sell your organizational culture. You know what I mean? Like if you're showing up in their inbox with like, hey, excited you applied, here's the 5 phases, like da 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 da. I mean, you're just more likely to win that job seeker. I'll move on. All right, recession, but not for all. I think my predictor for 2023 is that we will see atrophy in the economy, but it's not going to be in the way that a lot of us have been freaked out about. We know that there's going to be atrophy because this is one of the rare times in our lifetime where you see the Feds actually working towards recession. I mean, it's what they're literally designing, right? They're trying to sort of clamp down on growth, and they understand that the only way to like bring that down significantly is for job loss and pain in the economy. The problem with that is what we know is that pain is not distributed equally, right? There's no equity in our economy in that sense. And so the folks that are going to feel the brunt of this recession are lower wage workers because they are in the riskiest industries in our economy. And so we're talking about folks that work in service industries like restaurants or, the health and beauty industry. Like all of those service workers are going to be hit first, right? And they are, less likely to have the kinds of savings or education or certifications to make them durable in this economy. And so when we talk about the looming recession, it's not a recession for all. It is a recession that is going to hit folks that are already sort of in the bottom rungs of our economic ladder, which is tragic and it's unfortunate. But I think it's knowing that helps us understand what 2023 might look like and what we might see happening at each of our institutions. So I also think that the recession is not going to yield the same kinds of impacts that we've seen in the past, where there's a recession and people come like running back to school to get those certifications. I think there's so much uncertainty in the job market that a lot of people are not going to have those traditional kind of reactions. And they're going to try to find something else in the job market before they kind of reassess their education or their skill development. So it won't be like 2008 or prior recessions, but it will be concentrated in low wage workers. The trouble too is that we've seen some layoffs sort of in the tech sector. That doesn't affect all parts of our state equally, but that does move people into other parts of the economy where they have transferable skills, even if they're like taking a job downgrade for a while, or they're graduating with IT, you know, in their background from school, they're more likely to take a job again that has financial security, which is further going to push kind of middle and low wage workers out to the edges. What it could do, though, is lead to some policy changes, right? So here in California, we've been on this like minimum wage push, and all of our areas have been working towards a minimum wage, and then that conversation is kind of quieted down. If you see inflation continue to affect low wage workers and then they're pushed into a recession, you might see a big resurgence of that. So we know that that's already started with the Commission for Fast Food Workers, and sort of the highlight was, you know, a huge bump in pay for workers that are at large conglomerate kind of fast food organizations. I think that's a telltale sign that if you see too much economic pain in this level of worker, that whole like minimum wage thing is going to come back, and it's going to be about $18 or $20 as a minimum wage. There's also discussion about sort of an assessment about the safety net that existed in the pandemic. And depending on what part of the political spectrum you look at, you're looking at it differently. There are a lot of people who saw the ample benefits and the child care tax credit and other supports as, you know, the lifeline that kept people from just diving into total poverty. And there are some people who think that that was a huge overreach and overspend. But if we do go into a recession, particularly for those low wage workers, you're going to see much more conversation about that, which could lead to some policy changes. I'll go with my last one, and then I'll open it up for questions. We're just about 10 or 11 minutes away. The last one, related, slowing wage increases. So there's less turnover in the market, and there's smaller raises. One of the most fascinating things that we saw over the last couple of years is a wage increase that pretty much touched all sectors of our economy. There is a lot of discussion about what happens next. There's actually an agency that runs something called the Employment Cost Index. It's called the ECI. And what it does is it tracks wage growth. So the stats I've got with me here is that in the second quarter of this year, there was a 1.3% wage increase from the previous. That cooled slightly to 1.2% in this last third quarter. So we're seeing a downshift. And it capped out at 5% across the economy year to year. So what that means is just we're not going to see these big wage increases. We're not going to see big bonuses, sign-on bonuses, in part because we're in a recession, but also because the labor market has kind of stabilized. We're coming out of the pandemic. Another trend that's related to this is that a lot of employers are going to hold on to their employees even when they experience atrophy in their bottom line. So they're going to be losing money, but they're going to be holding on to their employees. It's called worker banking. You're going to keep them even if you're experiencing a recession, because the cost of letting people go and rehiring them is much too high. And that's something that employers learned during the pandemic when they laid a ton of people off in March and April. And then to try to get them back actually cost them a lot of time and money. So the fact that employers are holding on to people, that there's less turnover, also suggests that there's going to be slower wage growth. It'll probably flatten out by the end of the year. And with that, I think I'm all done there, Greg.
I got a question, and you kind of rolled into it. I'm really intrigued, worried that this minimum wage increase for fast food going up to $22 an hour. I'm guessing they chose fast food because it means every other retail is going to have to follow suit, and it will create a tsunami of raising minimum wage across California. Where do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about this a lot, but so kind of like the headline was that there's a commission that could raise wages up to $22 an hour. there's a particular reason why fast food chains are easy to hate. And so it's not that it's all fast food workers, it's the big like owners of like McDonald's and Jack in the Box and those kinds of things. So why is it so easy to get mad at these guys? It's easy to get mad at these guys because they actually did really well during the pandemic. Okay, so they did really well. I mean, if you drove by an El Pollo Loco, like during the pandemic, there was just like a line around the corner. And they did not raise their wages for those workers during that time at the same time that they were making like tons of money, right? So from a worker kind of like equity perspective, knowing that those workers were largely people of color, kind of low wage workers, they did not sort of share that wealth. And so they have not moved into a space like the Starbucks of the world, where they are like offering benefits or other access points. And sort of the market information shows that they're making just as much money. They have been hurt a little bit by the rising cost of food. There's actually a lettuce shortage, if you haven't heard. And so that is pinching them a little more than it was during the pandemic. But there was a lot of resentment around these like large chains that were not improving job quality. And so this was a policy decision to get them into that move. Do I think that it's going to really go to $22 an hour and that kind of thing? I really don't think that that's what's going to happen. But that's kind of the discussion and where that went.
Awesome. Thank you. Other questions? Feel free. Please unmute yourself or throw in the chat box.
I do have a question, Eric. This is Rosie Antonekia. So with enrollment low at all of higher ed across the nation, with businesses cutting back their hours because they cannot find employees to work for them. And you alluded to it a little bit, people starting their businesses, and maybe that's shifting the workforce where people are working. But I mean, if they're not in school and they're not at work, where are these young people?
Yeah. Oh man, $1 million question. Another thing that I would add to what's happening is the gig work, the Uber, the Instacart, a lot of that has become less lucrative.
Mm-hmm.
So the price of an Uber, I don't know if you've taken them, but it's actually gone up because a lot of these businesses that were launched in the gig economy have moved from being sort of a startup into an IPO phase, which means now they actually have to deliver profits. Mm-hmm. And so before, the game plan was just like get more subscribers. Now that they have to like actually produce profits for their shareholders, you're seeing the prices of that go up, which means someone who's driving for Uber is making less money and they're being motivated to go back into the traditional workforce. So that's another kind of thing that we're seeing. Where young people are is a really difficult thing to understand. They have their labor participation rate has dropped faster than any other segment of the market. We also know that culturally, more of them are staying home after graduation. There isn't kind of that thing that I had where I was like, get me out of here, get me a driver's license. I want freedom. I just like, as far away as I can possibly get. That's not happening. And those of you that are parents are just doing too good of a job. Like it's just too warm and cozy, and so they're staying close to home. And so that's also informing sort of the decisions they make. A lot of them are taking like lower wage employment. And that's why you're not seeing them in a lot of your like enrollment statistics, is they are waiting it out. Or I've also read of trends where they are enrolling, but they're not fully enrolling. They're taking like, 2 classes or 3 classes and what would traditionally be a full load. But I would love to talk to you more about that, but I know I promised to give Greg 5 minutes.
Yeah, I need just a few minutes. So I hope you all enjoyed it, Eric. I always thank you, Eric, for presenting today. You're always so engaging. Love your trends. Informative. Rosalinda put a survey in there. If you please take a few moments to fill out the survey, gives feedback for us on how we can make these better and what you'd love to hear going forward on workforce. or if you'd like to present. If you enjoyed today, we actually have our next one. I know we're sharing it right now, is Elizabeth Sanders Park out of Wellington, North Carolina. She's America's Tough Career Transitions. She's gonna be speaking for us January 18th at 11 o'clock. And if you enjoy the content you've gotten from us throughout this year through the webinars, we have our state conference coming up. We'd love to see all of you there. Sunny Palm Springs, March 1st through 3rd. Bring your golf clubs for after sessions or early morning one. Great. We have everybody there from, employers, job developers, DOR representatives, workability representatives. Everyone is there. Ton of information, 3 days. We think our prices are pretty reasonable compared to some of the other ones out there. So we'd love to have you down there. And if you'd love to present, we will still even take presenters. So Eric, if you want to come down and want to present at the state level to all of California, we'd love to have you in person again. But
Thanks.
I want to thank you for sharing today.
Wait, we're missing our LinkedIn photo. Although I just
There
want
you
to
go.
share with everyone, I took a couple during the presentation just in case we had anybody that wanted to join us as the event started. We never know who we could reach. So I want to ask Eric, could you put the first page of your PowerPoint slide up? And then what I'm going to do, there are a couple of individuals. I think there's like 2 or 3 pages right now. So if for those of you that are willing to come out on LinkedIn, I would say put your cameras on, get your smiles on, get your hair in position, wipe the shine off, and then
It's our
gentlemen do your dab, right?
CPA tradition.
All right, so we're going to do a couple of them, and I'm going to ask for a thumbs
There you
up, everybody.
Awesome.
Hold on, let's see. Hold on a second. Let's do this. Hold on, let me get it ready. 1, 2, and 3. Oops, that one did not come out. I did it wrong. 1, 2. Okay, be patient with me because I have to do 3 pages to get everybody in here. And then for those of you that want to remain with your name showing, I thank you for that. I thank you for that. All right, so let's see. That's the first page. Let me go to the second page. And then I'm going to ask again for a big thumbs up. 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm going to move on to the third page as soon as I save this one.
Because we don't know what page we're on. So you get to smile and thumbs up for all of them. Rosalind is our selfie extraordinaire. So our
Okay,
photojournalist.
Let's see. All of you are creating history here. Let's see, where's my third page? Oh, we have people that dropped off. Okay, so I guess we got 2 pages. There was 3 pages, now we're at 2. Am I missing anybody? So I think we're good, actually. I think I got everybody that's remained on here.
And it's
Very good.
11:59.
Thank you, Eric.
So kept our hour promise. Thank you all so much for coming. We hope to see you again next month. Eric, I can't thank you again for your time today. Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Hi, my name is Luis Suburbia, and I work with the Merced County Office of Education, and I'm a proud member of California Placement Association.
Hi, my name is Greg Friedman. I work with Merced County Office of Education. I'm a proud member of the CPA Northern Region.
Hi, my name's Denise Crawford, and I work at Bakersfield College, and I'm a proud member of the California Placement Association Central Region.
Hi, I'm Rosalinda Rivas, and I'm a proud member of the California Placement Association.